said, we've been running it 3 years, so obviously the second year we're in this, we get hit by Hurricane Irma. And to say that we were a little bit on edge when it all happened, it was kind of a doomsday theory. We had planned everything out, looked at the financial modeling and all that, and never, ever, ever did anybody think about a hurricane hitting right here on the coast. Obviously, when it was coming, when it all started, we started kind of watching it. It was going to hit on the East Coast. So we were kind of, it's going to be fine. We're going to get some wind and some rain out of it. Not going to worry. And then obviously it shifted and went across the Keys and started coming this direction. So we got in get going in a hurry mode. So things we did immediately, we filled all of our fuel tanks with fuel. We carry probably around 2,000 gallons of diesel and probably 500 gallons of unleaded gasoline. We topped everything we had off. Tractors, the buses like you'll ride on, we've got 5 or 6 buses, vehicles, extra fuel tanks. We stuffed fuel everywhere we could stuff fuel, knowing what was coming if it hit on top of us. And then we refilled the tanks back up. So we had plenty of fuel, which is going to be an important part of this story when you hear how long it took us to get electricity. The other thing we started doing, we called all of our friends and said, hey, if you guys have big generators, send them to us immediately. Because the East Coast, we had sent actually some of our stuff to the East Coast to try to help them out. And when the storm shifted, we had to get all that stuff brought back over here. To put it in perspective, one other piece of the puzzle, we have 3 full-time employees that run the ranch. We have a ranch manager, and we have 1 full-time cowboy and 1 person that just operates tractors, equipment, that kind of stuff. The rest of the labor that we employ is all what we call day workers. So they're all people we hire on a day-to-day basis. They're 1099 employees, they're not W-2 employees for us. We have a good crew because we have other things, other properties in the state that we deal with. So they're not full-time employees of ours. They leave and go work for other ranches, but in essence, they're full-time employees of ours in a lot of ways. And of course, what are they doing? They're trying to get they all live in Highlands County, Glades County, Hendry County, and Charlotte County. So while we're trying to get stuff back over here to help us out, they're trying to get their houses taken care of. And so it was everybody was just trying to get stuff done. We did get 2 huge generators in here to run. One of the issues we've got is, and we'll go by it here in a minute, all of our employees live in houses down the road, and they're on 1 single water well. There's 2 wells, but it's a single point of water for the houses. So the one thing we knew we had to do was make sure we could pump water to the houses. And we were relatively sure we would lose power, but that was an unknown. So it takes a tremendous generator. We had one of the old military diesel generators that we plugged all that into just to make sure everybody had water, because we knew that was going to be one of the big keys. The other problem we have is this is actually a restaurant, and we were loaded up with food, which, you can throw the food out, but we'd rather not do that if at all possible. And well, when you're running the freezers and the big coolers in there, you got to have a good size. It doesn't look like much, but when those freezers kick on, you have to, the amp draw on it's huge, so you can't just plug them into a regular old go to Home Depot and buy that. We did realize we were going to need smaller generators, so I actually got up the morning that they said it's definitely coming in this direction. I got up at 5 o'clock and bought every piece of plywood I could buy and every generator I could get my hands on. And my wife was there. We had people calling around saying, hey, if you got one, we'll give you a credit card right now and we'll buy it. So we got 4 or 5 generators located as well. This is probably the most impactful thing that happened to us. A week and a half before Irma hit us, there was a low that set right over the top of us, and it wasn't designated as a tropical low. It was just a subtropical low, I guess what they call it. And it dumped about 28 inches of rain here in about 24 hours. So we were already completely saturated. All of the canals, we'll go across the cypress swamp. That's the Telegraph Creek. That thing was completely, it probably was up to here on me where we'll cross across the spillway. So we're already completely inundated with water. And of course, here comes the storm, and it's the summer. So we're getting storms pretty repetitively every afternoon, dumping, quarter to an inch of rain. So at the time, we weren't factoring that in all that we were thinking about. We were really worried about wind. So the storm comes across us. Obviously, the one thing that was beneficial to us, not so much to our friends inland, the storm curved to the east when it came in. So it came across Everglades City. Most of the damage from wind is to the east of us. So we did not have structurally a lot of damage to the east of us. If on, I don't know where you guys stayed last night, but up on 78 Vermont Road, that's our northern border. If you go 5 miles to the east of here, they had multiple tornadoes that took out greenhouses and stuff up there. We had nothing. There's lots of rain. We did have wind, but they had a lot more damage just to the east of us than what we had here. Thank goodness, because you know, when you see some of what happened to the east of us, it's pretty scary to think about what could have been. The storm comes over us. We lost power a few hours into the deal. We are on Lee County Electric Co-op's power. We are the absolute last place they have power on the north of their grid, okay? So we didn't have power for almost 8 weeks here. None, zero zilch. We ran off generators. You can imagine it was miserably hot and humid. And without power, obviously, everybody was trying to figure out, you know, what do you do? We couldn't run everybody's house because there's just not enough capacity. I mean, when you have a big air conditioner, you've got to have a supersized generator to run that. So we were out of power for about 8 weeks. We had no structural damage, so we're lucky. So if you look at these barns or these buildings here, they were built, what, 30 years ago probably. When I called David, who's our ranch manager, I called David and I said, go down there and just tell me that's all gone so I don't have to think about it anymore and we can figure out how to rebuild this, which we actually wouldn't have been upset about that in a lot of ways because we'd like to redo some stuff here. And he called me and he said, you're not gonna believe this, there's nothing wrong. I said, come on, man, they had to blow something over. And he said, no. He said, roofs are on, windows are in, no problem. There's a lot of water, but no problem. I said, what else has damage? We have one pole barn, and I'll show you can actually see it because we didn't put the same color tin up on the roof. That's all the damage we had right here. Now, there are some structures around the property that were old that we weren't being used. And we had a pole barn out to the very far northeast corner of the property. It was really old, and whatever happened to it, the whole roof the poles must have just all cracked at the same time, and it dropped straight down. All that you could see was the roof. That was a tin roof. It didn't twist it, it didn't break it, it didn't blow the tin off. It literally just went poof and fell down. It looks just like this almost. It's a lot bigger, but just completely, the roof was completely intact, dropped, which ended up being a good thing because we pulled all the tin off of it and patched the one over here, and it gave us some tin. But other than that, we had no wind damage on the property. A couple houses had a few shingles that were taken off, but nothing that was like you couldn't stay there. We couldn't get fixed relatively quick. Really no roof damage. We had screens on screen porches that got blown out, those kind of things. But big damage, none at all, which we are really lucky that was the case. So the one thing that did happen is the water came up unbelievably. So there was a couple things going on. One is a couple of the houses that we have people staying in, the water was about to come in the houses. And I'll show you the houses when we go on the tour. And it's amazing how far that water out of the creek spread across this as flat as this is. About the time we were about to say, okay, we got to do something, it started to recede and we got lucky. It didn't do any damage to anybody's homes. I'll show you the horse barn. The horse barn probably had water up to here. We have a big military truck that we feed the cows off of, liquid feed. And that was really about the only way for about 2 days we could get around inside of the property. We had a couple power lines go down, but once again, in the big picture of life, not a big deal. David and them had winds at the height of it that were probably 100 to 105 mile sustained winds for some period of time. But you know, it came and it went. We were not in the eye wall, we were just off the side of it. But the way that the storm curved this way, we were not in it on the side of the wall very long. And it really wasn't that bad when you talk to everybody. And so the other thing that happened, you know, so when you have something like this, you know, it's 100 square miles is roughly what it equates to when you look at it on a map. So the first thing we had to do was make sure the cows weren't out on the roads. because that's just what you do when this happens. Luckily, when we got hold of the place, the first thing we did is we ran all the exterior fences on the property, and we cleared as much brush, trees, and stuff like that away from it. This is all pre-hurricane. It's just stuff we do when we take over a property. So we went and we had a fairly clean fence line to start with, which was really helpful because it created a situation where when trees fell, unless they fell a long way towards the fence, then we weren't going to have fence damage. We had one spot, there weren't cows in it. We fixed it relatively quickly and went on. The one place that we did have problems is to the east of us is Likes Brothers, their far west boundary of their property. That fence line was not one that's easy to get to begin with, much less after the hurricane. So actually I flew a drone to check that fence line. And we had bad fence damage over there because once again, it was all off their side, a little bit off our side, but it blew that direction based on how the wind was turning. But once again, we didn't have cows over there at the time. We did go through and try to push things back into the ranch to get the cows out of things that bordered the outside areas. But when it happened, because of how that storm shifted, and we aren't planning for it to be here, there was only so much we could really do to get everything done. But so luckily the external fences or exterior fences of the property were in really good shape. So we didn't have a problem. Internally, big problem. Big oak trees fell, you can see them everywhere. We had a lot of internal damage on fences. The good thing is, as long as the cows are inside our boundary, we don't really, I mean, we do care from a management perspective, but in the big picture, not a whole lot of concern about that. We're still fixing fences today. Same thing with the cows. Everybody always asks, how many cows died in the storm? 0. We're unaware of anything. We never saw buzzards flying. Once again, animals are resilient. They automatically know what to do. They got up in the palmettos and laid down, and I'm sure they put their backs in the wind like they do when a storm comes. And we saw nothing where things died, buzzards flying, no deer, no nothing. I mean, we saw absolutely 0 from that. Doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Once again, 100 square miles, there's only so much you can see. But when we count the cows every year, when we bring them in to work them and vaccinate them and all that, 0, our numbers were close, minus just normal loss that we see year in and year out. So we didn't have any loss due to that. The next year, the conception rates on the cows actually were really good. And so that, from that perspective, we didn't see anything on that. Weaning weights were not off or anything like that.